This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, Bachelor Party is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. And of course, we all know Tom Hanks was the star of that film, getting together with all of his friends for a night of chaos. But I got the real scene stealer of the film on the phone with me, the guy that to me makes me laugh like no other in the film. I have the awesome Brad himself. He's sober. I don't think he's trying to commit suicide. He's on the phone. I'll have to talk him out of it if he is. But I got the wonderfully talented, scene-stealing Bradford Bancroft on the phone. Hello, Bradford.
Hey, Greg, thank you. It's great to be with you guys.
Yes, an awful lot of B's in your name. Awful tongue twister.
I used to get made fun of all the time about my name. I had a friend in high school actually said, Bradford, that is the most pretentious name I've ever heard. I'm going to call you Joe. And for 45 years, that's what he's called me, Joe. So there you go.
He still called you that.
He still calls me Joe.
So you're 45 years old.
Thank you for your kind words at the beginning of your show. It's really a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, yes, I think you are, to me, the reason the film is... Well, I think there's so many funny performances in that film, but to me, you're the scene stealer. I had Tracy N. Smith on here last month, and we just kind of chuckled when we started talking about your scenes. And she remembers them quite fondly as well, and especially the scene where you conk your head in the empty bathtub. She thought that was funny.
Yeah. Oh man, so many great things in it. I always laugh at the 3D movie theater where the woman gets punched in the nose and then goes, "Whoa!" It just cracks me up. And I can't believe, Greg, it's 35 years later. Isn't it amazing? Time just flies.
35 years. I don't know whatever happened to Tom Hanks, though.
Yeah, poor guy. He's such a good guy. Just when I think about, all the folks that I've worked with and all the kind of idiots, in this town in Hollywood, Tom just remains one of the sweetest, most genuine, authentic people ever. And I have the highest regard for him.
Yes. Well, you know what? You play Brad. And of course, to me, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I laugh so hard at your scenes. I mean, Tom Hanks is getting married. None of his friends are buying it, but nonetheless, he's getting married and gets together with all of his friends. And of course, you're the last one to show up. You're coming in from the airport, and of course, you're up on top of somebody's bag, and he tells you to get off.
So funny. Well, there's so many things that changed in the movie, including the two leads. I don't know if you know that Paul Reiser and the great Kelly McGillis were originally cast in those roles, and a few of us were filming with them for a long while, and 20th Century Fox realized that they've got a very funny movie on their hands, and had, I guess, always wanted Tommy to be in the lead, but he was filming Splash, so Fox put in some additional money and just waited for Tom to become available, which was such a crushing blow to both Paul and Kelly. Kelly and I had been brought out from New York City to do the film, and at that time they both thought their careers were over. Ironically, both of them went on to have fantastic careers. So the film went through a ton of changes, including my character, who I had built up as this kind of crazy friend, miserable and talking about wanting to commit suicide because his marriage is so unhealthy. But in the original ending, Greg, Tom arranges for my wife and I to get back together again, which we actually filmed. And for some reason, the folks at Fox decided that they'd rather keep that character Brad as the maniac. And so we came back to reshoot the whole ending of the movie with me driving Tom and Tawny off in the bus. So it's amazing how things change in this town.
Which ending do you prefer?
Well, honestly, as an actor, I had built my whole character around this crazy stuff, knowing that at the end of the movie, I would be straightened out, sober, reconnected with my wife, and I have this very tender moment with Tom saying, "Thank you so much, you saved my marriage." So it was, I prefer that, but I understand for the kind of hijinks that they wanted to end with Brad doing his, silliness.
Well, Brad doing his silliness to me was the funniest parts of the movie to me, and yeah, that part where you're introduced and you're in the airport, you're just loud and larger than life, and this guy tells you to get off his suitcase. He's like hauling it, and you're on top. Was that in the script, or was that something that just came up on the spot?
Yeah, no, that was in the script. We had shot that actually at an airport originally, and they had all kind of technical problems, so they decided to shoot it in the lobby of the hotel. So yeah, that was always the sight gag as we started it.
Yeah, and of course your character is miserable. I love how you're sitting in front of this movie. They're waiting for the hookers to show up, and you guys are watching this love sap movie, and you're like, "This so reminds me of my wife, the bitch."
It was a Shirley Temple movie of all things too, which is hilarious. Oh my God!
You would get so emotional, and then you just come right down on the X,
The other funny thing that you're reminding me of, so much of that stuff was improvised and thought up on the spot. We're all kind of making things going, and I had suggested, wouldn't it be funny if Brad got up on the piano and started doing this wild dance, and then kind of, because he can't dance, he's just totally messed up, and so they laughed and then brought in a stunt dancer to do it instead of allowing me to do the original gag. So,
oh wow,
I was disappointed in that. But anyway, that too was a funny gag.
Yeah, why bring in a stunt dancer? Why not use you?
I don't know. I have no idea. These are the things that you can't, And I said, now then get I'll be spinning on my back on the thing, and then get a shot of me spinning going, I'm peeking, which would have been hilarious. But they decided that it would be funnier to have a professional dancer come out of it. I don't know.
You weren't the only one messed up in this movie. That poor donkey.
Oh, my God. Well, that, I don't know if Tracy told you, but it was just, it was very close to dying. And we're all surrounding this thing, and they bring in the animal trainer to give it a shot of, adrenaline in its heart. And Neil, typical of Neil Israel, God bless him, was going, keep shooting. And I started laughing, going, well, what are we? We're suddenly shooting Sophie's Choice here. It's gone into the tragic and dramatic. So, luckily, the donkey survived. So.
Yeah, well, didn't just take a shot of that. It was taking some lines off the table.
Oh my God! Yep. Those were the days, weren't they, Greg?
Yeah, they were. I would have been 12 years old the year that Bachelor Party came out. I did not see it in the theater, of course, but I do have a fondness for teen screwball comedies, and of course, these characters, of course, aren't teenagers anymore, but they're in that young adult phase and that teen sex comedy zone, and I've always had a fondness of these, and Bachelor Party turned out to be a pretty big hit. Were you guys surprised?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I thought it was pretty funny just reading it, but we were coming out of the Animal House era,
Mm-hmm.
and just like, the son of Animal House. So Pat Proft and Neil Israel had been working with the Kentucky Fried movies, and had been working with some of the other guys that had come out of that, some of the comedies that were coming out around that time. And so I felt, especially when it was interesting, I started to tell you that when they brought in Tom and Tawny,
Mm-hmm.
they fired half the cast and fortunately kept me on payroll while they waited for Tom to be free from Splash. So I knew then that Fox really felt they had something good on their hands. Otherwise, they would not have added in all that additional money and waited for Tommy to be able to do the film with us.
Wow. Well, you have some pretty outrageous scenes in it. Suicide's no laughing matter, but you definitely have some funny scenes where you're trying to drown yourself in the bathtub, and of course Tom Hanks pulls the drain. You try to get that last bit of water, and your lungs, and all you do is thump your head in the bathtub. Tom's so sympathetic.
Yeah. I just, as we're preparing for all those scenes, the thing for me, because I have come from a very serious acting background and have loved acting my whole life, so setting up comedy as straight as possible, so it's not just hijinks, but you're really infusing the character with something real and authentic,
Mm-hmm.
Makes the comedy, I think, even that much more rich. And so, for me, I didn't actually want to commit suicide. I just wanted Tom to find me and to, love me and be my best friend. So all those kind of subtle things going into those scenes is really what I think we were going for, which just makes the comedy that much funnier because it's so pathetic.
Yeah, you tried to slash your wrist with an electric razor. Like, I like that Tom Hanks goes, well, you're going to have a nice smooth...
Smooth and kissable wrist. That's right. Oh,
like, stuff like that was really funny, especially given the subject matter. Trying to commit suicide is pretty serious, but your character turned out to be quite lovable when it comes down to it, and you kind of really were the peak of the climax, as far as I'm concerned. You and the bus.
well, thank you. The other funny gag was driving the bus through the wall of
Mm-hmm.
the theater, which was, another, wonderful gag. So, yeah, they gave me some fun stuff to do in that movie, and it's amazing how 35 years later, folks, especially folks that were young like you, Greg,
Mm-hmm.
still remember it so fondly,
Well, it's funny because you're in the bus and you're speeding and you're like, they're not going to stop me this time. I'm doing it. You go through the wall and everybody's applauding because it's like they think it's 3D. And you're like...
Just ridiculous, yeah.
I think you had a reason to live.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, it must be amazing to have been 12 then. And I mean, did you actually know about those kinds of films? Did your parents allow you to see those kinds of films? You said you didn't see it until years later.
You want me to tell you what my story is? I had an uncle that still have an uncle, but owned a video store in the 80s. And we weren't allowed to watch movies like that. But my older brother used to chum with my cousins. And they would rent these kind of movies. And the stuff we weren't allowed to see, like the screwball comedies, like the teen ones, and the slasher films. And I remember one time, and I tell a lot of the horror film alumni this, they had rented Friday the 13th Part 2. And after 3 kills in the movie, it was a scene where Kirsten Baker is wandering naked out in the lake, where my mom comes in and turns the television off. And God bless Kirsten Baker, she became the first woman I officially seen naked.
Boy, well, you're braver than me, my friend, because I can't watch those horror movies at all. I never saw any of them. It just... I don't have the constitution for it.
And then later on, of course, the cousins, we discovered Porky's. And
yeah.
And Porky's goes a little bit further than Bachelor Party, I think.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of perverse stuff, growing up, but I don't know. It hasn't had a negative impact on me, I think I grew up quite well, and, so... I mean, I like Bachelor Party. Yep.
We were, I was thinking of, so many people have asked me, why didn't they do a sequel? And frankly, the answer is Tom didn't want to do it, but they would come back with ideas for sequels, every once in a while. And the one that intrigued me the most was having me do a cameo in one of these things. I guess they know now that I am a creative arts therapist and marriage and family therapist, and so they were going to make Brad a marriage and family therapist. And he's written a bestseller called Pain is Such a Rush, and I thought that was hilarious.
Why didn't they just do Bachelor Party 2 starring you as Brad? I mean, I can't see that being bad. Why not?
Well, I guess I didn't have the cachet that some of the others did, but thank you. It's very sweet of you to say.
Well, yeah, I mean it, as gifted as Tom Hanks is, and, he is a 2-time Academy Award winner. Who'd have thought this Bachelor guy was going to go on to win 2 Oscars?
Well, boy, I might have. I mean, Tom and I used to laugh. This is a hilarious story. We used to talk about our upbringing in the theater, and both of us had done repertory theater where, you go to a community and you're doing 2 or 3 plays, including Shakespeare and the classics. And so to kind of have those kind of chops is really important in our mind. So we were standing around one day talking with some of the cast members about this concept, saying, we don't feel like actors should be able to do films until they have had a good theater background. And one of the actors, who will go unnamed, walked up to us and said, "You know what, fellas? I've never actually seen a play."
Okay.
Tom and I rolled our eyes and went, "Well, there we go. But yeah, we as young Turks just starting out, we had a tremendous fondness and respect for the theater and the acting profession, and so I had no doubt that Tom would go on and do whatever he wanted, and he did it with such grace and humility. I mean, he really is a sweetheart.
So you couldn't picture you as Brad playing Forrest Gump?
Sure. Are you kidding? It's just how the cards turned out. I had a good long career. I was a character guy and did a lot of classic other B movies and films that I loved making. But I certainly didn't consider myself a movie star. I was really a character guy who did a whole lot of different characters in all of the different movies. In fact, there was a film that was being shot in Africa that I wanted to do very much, and the casting director had told my agents at ICM that they didn't see me in the part. And I got a little mad and told my agents to just set up a meeting, and I said, I'm really disappointed in this reaction because I'm a character guy. I have played a whole lot of different things, and the fact that you believe that Brad is who I really am doesn't say much for you as a casting director who should understand I play a whole lot of different roles. So that worked, and I was in Africa the next month.
Well, if Brad was Forrest Gump, how many people do you think would sit in the bench with him?
I don't know. I've never been asked that before.
That would be some odd conversations.
That's a lovely film too, isn't it? I just saw that recently. It was just great.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Tom, of course, was just early in his career. Of course, did Splash the same year, so he had a pretty good 1984 was a pretty good year for him. And I guess you had a fun time working with him. What about Tawny, I mean, the lovely bride?
I love Tawny. She's a terrific gal, and I have some delicious pictures. In those days, I used to ride a motorcycle, and I had I come from New York City in the whole punk era from the late 70s, so I was riding a motorcycle. First thing I did when I was brought out here to do Bachelor Party, and I've got some hilarious pictures of Tawny in her nightgown on the back of my motorcycle with me in full leather. I treasure them. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. She's terrific. She's terrific.
I thought another funny scene. This one didn't have you in it, mind you, but scene where she's in bed with Tom Hanks and she says, I can't get to sleep. And Tom Hanks like, I got the answer for that. And he pulls his hammer up off the nightstand.
Yep. No, it's so fun.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And, of course, her parents, played by George Grizzard and Barbara Stewart. Barbara Stewart definitely had quite the night in that, especially a scene at a restaurant involving what she's perceived as a hot dog.
Yep.
That was a favorite night of shooting for Tracy.
Oh yeah, no, that was hilarious. That's right. Yeah.
But one of the women that did stand out to me, and it's sad she's gone because she was way too funny, was Wendy Jo Sperber. What were your memories of her?
Oh, she was just so funny and great. There's just so many wonderful folks we all were kind of starting our careers around then, and she just had such a great, beautiful spirit, so generous and fun. So yeah, I remember her fondly, and it really is a sad that she left us too early.
Well, Neil Israel, of course, would cast her next year in his next film, Moving Violations, and she was hilarious in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But, of course, we have these group of fellas, one of them that really stood out to me was Gary Grossman, as Gary, who has a bit of bad luck during the night of partying.
Yeah, well, that has become so politically incorrect, that whole thing, but it is pretty funny. I see Gary all the time. He and I both serve on the board of a local theater here. In fact, it's a theater that he had set up and started in Hollywood. So I see him regularly, and Bob Israel, Neil Israel's brother, also is an active participant in that theater. So I see those guys all the time.
So is he still trying to get women to show up at bachelor parties?
No, he's been happily married for a gazillion years. I mean, I laugh so much, Greg, because my own son is turning 32 this year, and I don't know how that happened because I still feel 25, so the math isn't quite working out here.
Has your son seen Bachelor Party? And if he has, what do you think?
Oh God, he's seen all of my work and has been with me through all of it. I had used to bring him with me to sets when I was here in town or in recording sessions. And there's a hilarious story when I was, the film I was just referencing, Damned River, which was the one shot in Africa, was kind of an action-adventure movie. I am drowned in the film by the bad guy. And so in recording the drowning scene for sound effects, I brought Michael with me. And there was a hilarious moment where the sound engineer calls out to the stage saying, "Excuse me, but was there a crying child in the scene with you in Africa?" And my son was listening to me die and was freaking out and crying. So we had to take him to safety.
Was he freaking out when you played Brad?
No, he loved that, and so yeah, he's been around the track a few times.
Another guy I got to ask about is Robert Prescott. Of course, played the. You want to talk about a despicable guy? Plays the ex-boyfriend of the Tawny character, Debbie, and the parents aren't exactly approving of Tom, and they want to set her up with this guy, and he wants to buy her. You want to talk about really demeaning a woman?
Yeah. But he also he was such a foolish character. I thought he played it just wonderfully. He was trying to be all macho and cool, and was also pathetic underneath it. So, yeah.
What were your memories of him on set? Because he played a very funny, especially he was great at taking the pratfalls.
Yeah. No, we all had such a great time. It was just. You're young and your career is just starting, so everybody's just so grateful and excited to be doing this work, and it was funny, and we were all urging each other on and improvising, and so yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, and of course Adrian Zem.
Yeah.
He's the one that kind of brought this all together, but none of them kind of believe Tom when he says he's getting married, and Tom Hanks, even as the bus driver, there's a lot of funny scenes involved, especially him and the nun.
Totally, yeah, no, and Pat Proft, who wrote it with Neil, I think is really great at those kind of gags. I keep up with him too. He's just very funny stuff, and so generous in allowing us to improvise too. I will never forget. I was at that the set when they were doing the tennis scene with Tom and the parents, and and Tom says right off the top of his head, "Well, look, I've got you guys should have grandchildren pretty soon. I've got my eye on this 17-year-old Korean girl that I think will be fabulous." And I just cracked up. I almost blew the scene from laughing out loud. So yeah, they were very generous in allowing us to just kind of make up stuff and do things. It was great.
It's funny because that joke was kind of repeated in one of the Naked Gun movies. I think it was the Naked Gun 33 and a third, where Leslie Nielsen and Priscilla Presley were seeing a marriage counselor, and saying adopting a kid is a big responsibility. And she chastises him, and he goes, "I am trying. Don't you remember I tried to adopt that 18-year-old Korean girl?"
Yeah. I'm not sure that Pat Proft wasn't involved in both of those things. He was involved in what was that series called? The
Naked Gun.
It was Naked Gun, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Pat was involved in that, Greg.
Yeah, well, yeah, he was involved with the Zucker brothers, of course, and Jim Abrahams, who did Airplane and Top Secret and the Naked Gun franchise. So, yeah.
Yeah. One of my best and oldest friends that I've known since 17 played the black guy who spoke jive in Airplane with Barbara Billingsley, and so we always have a fun time remembering those days. I think he shot that just before we shot Bachelor Party. So,
is he still around?
Yeah. Oh
yeah. Does he still speak jive?
Sure. Why not?
Well, I thought the subtitle. I love the subtitles. Golly and shit.
Yeah. Funny stuff.
Yeah,
Norman Alexander Gibbs, a really fun, another good, talented actor.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's some other films that you've done that I do want to ask you about, like 315. Getting a little more serious here.
Yeah, with Adam Baldwin. Boy, that was a intense movie. Back in the gangs in the hip-hop era, early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And Adam, I really loved him. There was a whole bunch of those guys that I met in that era are still great friends. But my favorite story of that was Adam and I had this big, schoolyard fight, and we kind of did the master shot and a couple of two shots with us, and then he was doing a close-up where he's supposedly banging my head against a steel rail, and he was doing it with a sandbag, and it just didn't look right. And I said, "Look, Ad, I'll step in so you've got me to work with," and figuring he'd go light on me, but no, this guy just slams my real head into the bar, and I just had a headache for the rest of the week. I said, "Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that."
Yeah, there are some lovely ladies in that. Deborah Foreman, of course, was in Valley Girl and Real Genius, and here she shows up in this. And Gina Gershon and Laurie Eastside. Remember them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, so another great one that was just so much fun. Panchito Gomez. There was a whole bunch of those folks that were great. The assistant director who went on to do other movies also passed too early. And he was a terrific guy. So, yeah, we made a lot of good friends, all of us just starting on that, our career paths in those early days. Was great.
Now, I haven't seen Dangerously Close, but I was looking at it here, and I did interview Tom Matthews, who I guess is in that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Greg, that's one of my favorite films and one of my favorite characters that I've ever played. I loved that character.
Okay.
Named Kruger Rains. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you get a chance to see that, check it out, because it's a great character.
Okay. Tell me a little bit without any spoilers.
Well, I played this punk kid in this high school, and I actually am one of the smartest kids, despite my mohawk and my leather. And so the story is really about these kind of conservative guys that are trying to rid the school of any bad elements. So they're getting rid of the rock musicians and the black kids and the punk rockers, and so kids start disappearing and dying, and you're really wondering who is doing it, and so that's what the movie's about. So I'd recommend it. And if you like me, you'll love that character. I think the best role in that movie as well.
Okay, well, that's one I'll have to check out. What about the Supernaturals?
That's just a divine one that had the greatest cast and turned out to be one of the worst movies. But LeVar Burton and Nichelle Nichols playing. In fact, I just wrote to LeVar yesterday because he was posting a picture of him and Nichelle, and such great memories of him and Nichelle. Bobby DeCicco and Maxwell Caulfield, Talia Balsam. It was just a lovely, lovely group. I had been filming perhaps 315 or something, and the director of that movie, a beautiful cat named Armand Mastriani, had seen me in a play in New York City and wanted me to be in this film with him. And I was finishing this gang picture and came to meet him and the producer, and the role he had for me was this kind of weak, innocent kid, and I walked into the meeting with earrings and leather. And Armand said, "Look, I want to introduce you to the producer, but could you at least take your earrings out and take off the leather coat?" And he was so beautiful because he wanted me and allowed me to finish filming 315, and they waited and shot around me, and then I got to show up 2 weeks later. So as Tommy Weir, and I had shaved my head and was wearing these weird glasses and had created this kind of stutter because I'm surrounded by all these wonderful lead actors. And so I decided to make my character, who they called Tommy Weird, even more weirdo. So that was a great movie and to shoot. And unfortunately, was released like gas from San Quentin, as my godfather Bradford Dillman would say.
Well, you also did the all-nighter. You want to talk us about some lovely women in your movies?
Oh yeah,
Susanna Hoffs, Dee Dee Pfeiffer.
Yeah, her mother directed that movie,
Mm-hmm.
and I just had a very small part. They wanted me in it to fool around with. Who was that beautiful woman that played my girlfriend in that movie? Do you remember that? She's a sister, and she works all the time now. I've gone.
Oh, Joan
blank.
Cusack?
Yeah, Joni. Yep, Joni Cusack. Yeah, she was fabulous. So.
She's awesome.
But that was just a fun thing, kind of a cameo that I did for Tamar Huffs and Suzanne and those guys.
So no all-nighters for you, huh?
Well, yeah, back in high school. Yeah.
What were your memories of Patty Hearst?
Well, I loved doing that as well. I had been shooting China Beach. I did the pilot for a TV series called China Beach with Dana Delaney, and they were set to do Patty Hearst, and brought me in to play one of the bombers.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul Schrader, who I just loved, was setting that up. And it was kind of interesting because once we got on the set, we did extensive auditions and improvisations to do the film. And then once we got on the set, I remember saying to him, Paul, what's your idea for this? What do you want us to do? And he said, look, casting is 99% of the problem. I've picked you. You go and do your job, and let me worry about the technical aspects of it. And I thought that was great freedom. Some actors would freak out by being given that much freedom, but we just had a terrific time. The other funny story that I have is that we went and filmed at the very bank that I was banking at many years ago, and I got to go in and rob the same bank with a machine gun. So that was a tremendous amount of fun.
You still bank there anymore?
Yeah, this was up in Valencia. I had gone to Cal Arts back in the day in the 70s. So yeah, it was up in Valencia.
Now, you mentioned dammed river in Africa. I love African wildlife. Do you got any stories about any animals there?
Well, I had gone actually a couple of times, Greg. In fact, my wife and I just went back to Kenya and Rwanda like 3 years ago. So all of my stories about the wildlife didn't happen on that film. What's interesting about that movie, though, is that we were filming right after Zimbabwe, which used to be Rhodesia, got its independence. And so many of the, I kept joking that we were in mine country safari because there were still mines and war things all over that country, having only been out of the war zone for a few years. So most of our filming was done in the actual Zambezi River, which they had never filmed on before. So I think I was contracted to go over there for 9 weeks or something, and months later I got home because we had to reshoot so much of the footage because of the technical problems of shooting down in that gorge.
Mm-hmm. Well, out of all the animals there, you say you've been back, what just blew your mind to see?
I think, they have a migration where the wildebeest and antelope are trying to cross the river, trying to get to other areas of water, and the crocodiles are in the middle of the river just waiting for them. And that is both terrifying and realistic. The other thing that we witnessed was a pride of lions taking down a sick buffalo, and usually the Cape buffalo are one of the meanest, most dangerous animals in Africa, and watching this pride of lions, and especially the females teaching the young ones how to kill and do it, watching them put this hunt together on this buffalo was just extraordinary.
You know, I saw a video. It was a battle between a male lion and a Cape buffalo. Both died, but the lion died first.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Cape buffalo is nothing to play around with.
Yep. Yep. Well, this one was sick, and they knew it, or injured, and so it was extraordinary to watch it. Just they'd gotten it down, and then he got back up, and finally the male lion got on top of its head and put its whole mouth over the Cape buffalo's nose and slowly suffocated it, while the females were teaching the young ones how to, attack it. And so it was really, as they say in The Lion King, the circle of life in real time.
Yeah. I don't know if that Lion King stuff works, though, because we get deer in our backyard, and I hold my cat up, and the deer just look up but they're they're not bowing.
You don't have a fierce warrior cat. Oh my God, that's funny, Greg.
I'm like, Kitty, you're not trying. Maybe it takes 2 times. But nonetheless, another film you did, Pucker Up and Bark Like a Dog, which had Uncle Rico himself, John Grise, in it.
Oh yeah, Johnny and I were old friends. I think they ended up calling that film Tips. Oh no, they ended up. It originally was Tips. That's right. And Robert Culp played my manager. I played like a very famous art star, and he played my manager. And he was not too pleased about doing a B film at that point. And I think he was judging himself compared to his old friend Bill Cosby, and not happy that Bill Cosby was, running the world and he was working with me.
Oh,
but
I think most people prefer to work with you right now.
Well, yeah, that might be true, Greg. Good point.
Yeah.
Anyway, another fun one that just kind of in a long career, you end up doing some winners and you end up doing some losers, and I kind of just am so grateful for the work and have been grateful for the work, because not only those movies, but also I did a ton of theater and performance art. When I got back from Africa, I had written a book. I was often writing about these films that I was doing, and then giving out the book as a kind of gift for the cast and crew. And when I wrote about the making of the African movie, the government of South Africa was still very much in apartheid mode, got a hold of the book and banned me from the country.
Oh.
And so I did a one-man multimedia show based on that book and the experience of shooting that, and getting kind of deeper into the kind of socioeconomic situation that was going on in Southern Africa, and getting into prejudice and how we learn prejudice and all that kind of stuff. So that was a real neat experience. So I've enjoyed not only the films that I've made, but also the opportunities to do theater and television series and commercials as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen this film, A Time to Die, but I mean, Tracy Lords, the late Jeff Conaway, and Richard Roundtree.
Yep. No, that was another real fun one. And the interesting thing about that one, Greg, was that in the old days there was a television series called Hard Copy, and they'd want all this kind of nasty gossip about folks. I got approached all the time to do any stories about Tom Hanks, and certainly after filming with Tracy, everybody wanted to hear nasty stories about her, and I said, I simply will not do that. I had great respect for Tracy and what she was trying to restart her career, and she reminded me so much of all of us when we were young actors, taking notes and being really diligent about her work. I'll say the same thing about shooting Universal Soldier with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren. Dolph was the same way. He had his acting coach and was very involved in taking notes and learning about the craft. And that was true for Tracy as well. I thought she was just a doll.
You know, I never even thought about anything negative about Tracy Lords. I remember, I know she's like this very beautiful woman, but I remember that her best from a comedy I've seen her in called The Nut House. You know, so I mean, I never ever thought of anything like that. So it's funny you bring that up, because I wasn't even going to go there, but I guess it's funny because. And this is one thing that I have to counter when I do this podcast is when I approach people, I gotta get people to trust me. And there's so many media outlets out there, and I've seen Quentin Tarantino and Robert Downey Jr. both have to shut down 2 interviewers that decided to turn the interview into this as opposed to this, and it makes it hard for people like myself.
Well, I have kind of a respect for Tracy because, as a businesswoman, because she obviously had been doing a whole bunch of pornography before she was of age, and took them to court and took over the control of her own career. And then I think as soon as she did that, she started remaking some of those things so that she would be the owner of them rather than, you know, these sleazy guys that had been taking advantage of her. So regardless of the medium that she was filming in, she was smart enough to take control of it and take it back.
I remember her best from The Nut House, of all things. I remember her in that, which was a slapstick comedy. That's what I remember her in best. But I know about.
I never saw that one.
Well, I'm a big fan of slapstick comedy, especially the old Pie in the Face, and she was involved in a big food fight, and she ended up getting covered from head to toe. And I was like, I gotta respect her on that end. She's not so glammed up that she can't do something like that. So, porn or not, I respect her.
Absolutely. I mean, I love Sandy Bullock for that, too. I mean, she's a beautiful woman and has done some hilarious slapstick stuff in her career as well.
The one who's impressing me right now, when I first saw her, I've been following her since she started, and I had a big crush on her. But, boy, you know, I forget all about that when I go watch her because she's so enticing every time I see her, is Emma Stone.
Yeah.
Like, Emma just keeps getting more intriguing to watch. She's going to play Cruella de Vil in the next Dalmatian movie, and I'm like, I want to see that.
Yeah. What was the one she just did? The English one, The Queen, that she was.
The Favorite.
The Favorite, that's right. And then La La Land.
Yep.
Divine too. Yeah, I agree with you. I think she's just magnificent.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know Glenn Close played Cruella de Vil, and Glenn Close played Cruella de Vil well, but after Fatal Attraction, it's kind of easy to cast Glenn Close. But Emma Stone playing Cruella, I'm like, okay, that's got my attention because, yeah, it's not so obvious, and that's what I like about it. Yeah.
Interesting.
You mentioned Universal.
One of the films that's come out now that I think is the total son of Bachelor Party, going back to Bachelor Party for a minute, is what's the one about the guys on the Bachelor? They're on a Bachelor Party in Vegas and they lose their memory. They've done about 3 of them now.
Oh, The Hangover.
Hangover is just hilarious.
I love the first one.
This is a modern day Bachelor Party done really well. Yeah, that's right. Hangover.
Oh, yeah, I love The Hangover. Wasn't a fan of the sequels, though, but I love that first one. That first one was brilliant.
Yeah, and I particularly loved at the end in the credits where they're showing all the Polaroid pictures of what actually happened when they were, blacked out. That was a brilliant move.
It was very clever, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I loved that, too. You mentioned Universal Soldier, which, of course, is a pretty successful film. And, talk about working on that.
Well, I had Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich were old friends of mine, and I'd done some writing with them back in the day. And so they asked me to come in and play this CIA doctor guy. But the funniest story that I have about making that movie is that we're out there. They had created the Vietnam jungle on the golf course in Sedona, Arizona, go figure. So we're doing this scene where I'm putting the dolphin and Jean-Claude on ice in body bags, and my partner John Story asked me, "So, what's your opinion about their deaths?" And as I'm zipping them both up, I said, "Extremely small penises." And the body bags start shaking with laughter as they crack up. And the scene was totally ruined, but it was great for the reel at the end of the movie.
Who laughed harder?
Oh, both of them. They were just like cracking up. It was just stupid. So yeah, that was just a quick one in and out. Another one of those cameo roles, but it was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, Ally Walker was also in that as well. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I see here you were in Cheers and China Beach. I don't talk a lot of television on here, but I am familiar with those two shows, definitely. Any stories there?
Well, it was great to be in one of the last episodes of Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find interesting about that is that there had been an amazing actor who was going to play what's her name's love interest, who was playing the girl at that point. Gosh, we're going back now.
Oh, Kirstie Alley or Shelley Long?
Yeah, Kirstie. Yeah, it was Kirstie's love interest. They had already filmed with this beautiful cat who had been in the new that new film with Steve Martin. I forget what his name is now. But anyway, he had filmed the whole thing, and then Tom Berenger's management called and said, "Well, Tom wants to be in the final episode," and they refilmed all of that part with Tom now as Kirstie's new love interest. And I thought, boy, there is real power in this city to be able to go in and reshoot it. And I felt so sorry for the original actor who might not have known, and gets his whole family together to watch his show Cheers, and then being played by Tom Berenger was just a very, very a wake-up call. But yeah, it was great, and Ted Danson is just beautiful. All of them were just absolutely sweet.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, we were doing some, I think it was a sex therapy group that Ted was in, and Sharon Lawrence was just starting her career too, and was in that group, and has a hilarious scene where she's talking about how she loves sex and can't stop herself, and Ted's eyes are just rolling, as he's trying to get close to her. It was just very funny. So great to see Sharon growing and doing such great work since then too.
Do you have any charities that you're involved in that you'd like to plug on here?
Wow, thank you. What a beautiful thing. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot of time in the nonprofit community here. One of, as I was saying, I work with the Skylight Theater, which Gary Grossman runs with his wife and family. Bob Israel's part of that. It's a small theater that does original work here in Los Angeles. But my favorite ones, I work with a guy named Harry Grammer at an organization called New Earth. And Harry was not only one of the CNN heroes a couple of years ago, but was one of 20 people named as an Obama Fellow out of 20,000 that were considered and applied. So Harry and I have been working together for about 15 years trying to work on the juvenile justice system and get these kids out of prison and into work. And we're doing some amazing work here transforming juvenile prisons into boarding schools and giving these kids some actual fundamental help to get out and start their careers rather than going back to gangs and and the streets. And the other one I want to mention is a beautiful company called The Unusual Suspects,
Okay.
which goes into various communities like juvenile prisons. Some of these things overlap, Greg. I kind of talk about an umbrella of care that we're taking care of these young kids that, are at risk of falling through the cracks. And Unusual Suspects is a theater company that gets kids to write their own material for 9 weeks. They do a writing program, and then another 9 weeks where they portray and act out the plays that they've written. And often, because there are so many talented people that know about and work with Unusual Suspects, we'll have groups of really well-known actors come in and perform the plays that the kids have written with the kids directing us.
Oh, wow.
So that's great fun and great empowerment for them. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug those. And if your listeners look them up online, Unusual Suspects and the New Earth Organization are two of the ones that I care very much about.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, absolutely. And do you have a web page that you want to plug on here?
Sure. My name, BradfordBancroft.com. I have been transitioning. I had transitioned many years ago. We didn't actually talk about that today, but I transitioned out of my acting career into the creative arts therapy world as my own son kind of grew up and out. I had been doing drama therapy with a leading company down here in Los Angeles for a long time. And when my son grew up and out, the executive director suggested that I was really good at that kind of work, and I decided to go back and get my degree in clinical psychology and earn my license as a marriage and family therapist, really focusing on the creative arts. And so I've been doing, like at the local VA, working with the vets in the PTSD ward, doing what I lovingly refer to as karaoke therapy, getting these guys to choose music that brings them back to a simpler, gentler time in their lives, and then the looking at the lyrics that they have chosen takes us into a deeper conversation about their lives and what they can do to kind of grow and prosper. So I do that. I've worked a lot in battered women's shelters. I do a lot of drug and alcohol rehab, which was always hilarious as I walked into these places, and people would recognize me from Bachelor Party and go, "Wait a minute, you're the drug addict from Bachelor Party. What are you doing here?" Which would allow us to have a wonderful start of a conversation. So, yeah, it's really been a great transition, Greg, out of that career that I loved for many, many years into this new one, which I so enjoy and which I can do for the rest of my life.
Well, you mentioned battered, Wendy Jo Sperber kind of battered her husband in Bachelor Party.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah,
it's a different time, Greg. Boy, so many of those gags, are politically incorrect now, but they are sure funny in that movie.
They are. I'll reach out to you on email, and get this out to you. And if you'd like to, I wouldn't mind getting Gary Grossman to come on here and talk about bringing women to bachelor parties.
Yeah, I'm sure he would love that. Gary and I were invited. I think we might be going together to some big event in New Jersey in the fall as part of this. You go and you meet fans and sign autographs and whatnot. So I'm sure
convention.
Gary would love that. I'll give him your information and see if he's interested.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on. Yeah. Oh, you're going to Chiller in New Jersey? Is that the one you're going to?
I think that's the one we're going to. Yeah.
Yeah, I just started doing the convention scene actually through this. A couple years ago, a Canadian actress invited me to Toronto to assist her at a horror film convention, and I was like, I couldn't say no to that. And it was the first time I was in a plane. And
oh wow!
You know where?
How far are you out? How far are you out from Toronto? You're really north of that, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in New Brunswick. I'm an hour ahead of Toronto, and I'm 4 hours ahead of you.
Wow. Okay.
Of course, in the case of Brad, everybody's hours ahead of him.
Yes, that's true. Well, it's funny to go back down memory lane with you here, Greg. I haven't thought about some of these things in forever, so thank you for the opportunity of returning to a great place in my life.
Give us a little Brad impression here, throw some of that out for us.
I'm not sure I can. The funniest story was when they went back to reshoot the ending, I had already moved on I was doing another movie, and Neil was saying, all right, we'll do the laugh, and I couldn't remember how to do it. So I held up production for a while as I figured out what the hell was that laugh about. It was such a spontaneous improvisation at the beginning. So anyway, I don't know. I don't put me on the spot for that. I can't. There was no, that was too long ago, my friend.
Well, before I let you go, I would I shouldn't bring this up yet. I meant to bring up the fact you mentioned conventions. Do you do the conventions a lot? And number two, what's the most interesting thing you've ever been asked to sign?
Oh Lord, I don't do. I've never really done the conventions, Greg. In fact, if I do this, it'll be the first one.
Oh wow!
But I'm very friendly, and unlike your earlier comments about people that try to manipulate or turn interviews around, in this day and age of Google, as a private therapist, I realized that if somebody wanted to find me with a lampshade over my head, they could. So I'm kind of open and not shamed by any of these things. It's all part of my past, and so I've had so many hilarious things happen to me. There was a man who contacted me from the old USSR and suggested that I was his twin in the USSR, and suggested that we should get together and do a combined USA-USSR of The Prince and the Pauper. And he had taken pictures of me off the television set in Moscow and arranged himself in the same black shirt and pose and sent them to me. And in case I couldn't tell who was who, he kindly wrote on the back of my picture my name, and on the back of his picture his name. And I was very touched, and always write back to folks. People that write to me, I will always sign their posters and send things back. But I wrote back and said, well, thank you so much. That's very sweet. And if you ever find yourself in the United States, do look me up. Well, a couple of months later, he was on my doorstep. He had used my letter as an invitation to a visa and got into the country that way. And thank God he was just an innocent artist guy and not a slasher killer. So it was weird, but okay.
Oh well, I hope you have fun at Chiller. I have a lot of fun at these, so I'm pretty sure you will.
Well, it'll be an interesting thing, so I'm open to it.
Who else from Bachelor Party's going to be there? You and Gary and.
I think Barry's going to go. Me and Gary and Barry, I think. And I'm not sure. I haven't talked to the guy in a while, the one who organizes it. But yeah, okay. I think the three of us for sure.
Okay, wow, that's fantastic. Well, before I let you go, I was wondering if I could get you to do a plug for my show.
Sure. Hey, y'all, this is Bradford Bancroft in Hollywood. I'm calling to plug Greg Gilbert's Python's Paradise out of New Brunswick, Canada. Thanks for listening.
We're celebrating the 35th anniversary of Bachelor Party. Again, does that blow your mind or what?
Oh, my goodness gracious. Makes me feel old, Greg. Makes me feel old.
Probably not as old as that donkey.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to talk, my friend. Good luck with everything.
Absolutely, and I'll be in touch, and I'll get this out to you. I don't know when, but I'll get it out to you.
All right, cool.
God bless you, and you have a wonderful day.
Right back at you, bro.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.